Hi guys, Kariena. One of the things I love about my mother tongue is we have greetings for the morning and we also have greetings for the evening. So, for instance, in the morning we say Wishere, and then in the evening we say Wire. And if you don't know any of that, we have even provided another option for you where there is a general greeting for whatever time, where you just say Kariena, Muriena, depending on how many people you're addressing. And of course, somebody responds appropriately, Amalai, Nomno, whatever you want to respond to. Anyway, Andayi is my name. Welcome on my show. For those who have been following up on this YouTube channel, Afya Yako Mkenya, I've been speaking so much about occupational health issues. I've also speaking about medical issues. I've been speaking about environmental issues, general management issues, and basically things that are related to those subjects. But today, I'm inspired to speak about something very different. So today I'm going to talk about an individual. So my story today will be very specific about an individual. And just to give you maybe an earlier clue of this individual or who this individual may be, I'm talking about one person who has been very effectual to my life. And not just my life alone, but life of other people who I closely associate with, especially my siblings. And having said that, I go without, I cannot avoid actually disclosing that the person I'll be talking about today is someone by the name of Andayi. Yes. So for those who heard my name, I said I'm Andayi, and that probably will be able to preempt who specifically this person may be. So today I'm talking about my dad, and sometimes it's very difficult to call him, rather to address him as my late dad, because the word late is so difficult to pronounce that usually it comes too late. But what I would want you to know is I have made several descriptions of my dad in other forums, especially when I'm talking to my friends and my family, and people who know him and those who do not know him. But the easiest description that I always like using is the term the greatest man that ever lived. So I always look at my dad as the greatest man that ever lived in my life. And when I talk about ever lived, it means there is a long historic past that is associated with me in relation to my dad. And of course, we know basically it is natural that most people don't talk about their dad, they talk about their moms. And it's a good thing because actually mothers do a lot, especially when it comes to, those small things that add a lot of quality to our lives. But I can assure you, as well, when it comes to my dad, he was really, really, really a special person. So maybe if I go direct to the point, rather to the story, is this gentleman, was born in some village in Western Kenya, and in a place called Butere. Is it a county? No, no, no. It is should be a small part of a county, a sub county within Kakamega County, and that must have been in the 1940s. And what happened to this young man when he was born at the age of around 5 years? Unfortunately, he lost his mother. So his mother died. And, sometimes it sounds more, honest when I simply say his mother was killed. But how he was killed, that is a different story, which I wouldn't go into, at the moment, because the story today is about my dad. Now, At the age of around 5 years, a young boy, left alone with, of course, one parent. Now that's the father. The father was a rich, wealthy man. And for those who understand those old days, wealth was not measured according to the number of cattle, money you have in the bank. But as I have given you a clue already, wealth was measured was measured as a result of the number of, property, other types of property that you had, especially, cattle and, land and, produce, land produce, or farm produce, how many, homes you have, and that means how many women you have married, and how big your family is. And this gentleman, now my dad's dad, really fit into that category very well. And um, uh, being, a rich person in the community, or in the village, meant rather, this guy was very much respected, and he had too much prestige and too much honor even from the community himself. And it means he had a lot of wealth, that, especially services that he could actually even hire to the community. For example, plowing. Those old days where I used to plow. You get they used to use bulls, like 4 bulls or so, and then you have that cart, that is pulled by, bulls, and then is pushed by human beings. Usually, it used to be young boys, young energetic boys. And so it meant having a big family was enough also to produce that labor for himself. So he was a rich man to an extent that, if we discuss about his wealth, that becomes another whole story. And fortunately, or unfortunately, as the story goes by, you'll find the two terms fitting in very well. Dad had older siblings. And older siblings means, especially boys. He had, his brothers who are older, much older than him. And this should have actually sounded like it was some form of security for him, because you would probably think this was a well mature group of people who were ready enough to kind of take care of him. But as the story continues, you realize, basically that's not what happened. It turned to be something very different. Expectation was different from exactly what went to become the truth. So, dad, actually, when the mother died, one thing that happened is, he still remembers that. He actually still remembered that. You know, one thing I want you to understand is, I still always feel like my dad lives today, and it's very difficult to differentiate, to talk to address him, as if he's not living. So most of the time, I feel like he still lives among me. Yes, physically, I know he's dead. I've accepted that. But one thing I know is, his impact to our life, his advice, his direction, it still, goes with me and the rest of my siblings up to today. So anyway, what happened with this gentleman? He, as a young boy, he became very vulnerable to some form of inappropriate treatment, or rather mistreatment. And what happened is, at that young age, he was not strong enough or old enough to be able to handle, other activities where which older boys were doing, the older brothers were doing. Like, for example, what I've just told you, pushing a plow, that, animal pulled a plow, that was used those days. So he could not do that. Obviously, you understand. So, by the age of around 7 years old, this gentleman was already um, given his role, and his role was actually to hunt for animals. And remember, my granddad had a lot of cattle, and we are talking about tens. We're talking about, a group of around 100 or so animals, goats, cows, and sheep included. And it was his sole responsibility each day, not just one day, each day, to wake up in the morning, very early in the morning, take these animals for grazing in the bush, and the only time you're allowed to come back is in the evening, when the animals are physically satisfied. So it was a very tough life for him. So what we're talking about is his life was, if I look at what he used to tell us his kind of schedule was: wake up in the morning, and when you wake up in the morning, try to grab whatever is there. And remember, those days we did not have breakfast. That was kind of a leisure that was not necessary. So you had to become very creative. So in the evening, what you do, you hide some, sweet potato or whatever it is, or muhogo, the cassava. So you hide in the evening. Then in the morning, you wake up. When you wake up, because you have a whole day to be out in the bush, and then you need to come back in the evening. So what he would actually do is, if he's been lucky enough to hide some food, then in the morning, you take that food, swallow it. And the funny thing is, this is not food that has been approved for your eating. So basically, what you need to do is put the food in the mouth. If it is a muhogo, it is a sweet potato also. And then you don't even have that leisure to chew, because somebody may spot you, and then you may end up in trouble. So the only option is to kind of squeeze it with your tongue, and once it has taken a shape that is good enough for your throat, or then you swallow that. And then you have to get a cup of water very fast from those nyungus. What are they called? Pots, those clay pots. Then you take very fast. So if anybody finds you in the middle of that kind of drama, then it's very easy to convince that person that it is water that you're taking. So this was actually a tough experience for him, but he got used to it, and that was his routine. Then, you know, after that, you have to get the animals. That's like 6 a.m. Have to get the animals, take them to the grazing land, fields outside there. It's for you to identify those areas. Those days, the advantage was that there was a lot. The land was very diverse, and that means we had the population was also very low. So actually, the you will probably expect, with the low density of population, you will end up with too much land that was not being utilized. So except now for grazing. And then of course get into the field with all these animals, and once he's there, he had to become even more creative, because once you leave the home, you have to understand you're going out in the bush, and you don't have the leisure of coming back at home. So while in the bush, you have to make that bush kind of self-contained to a level that there has to be a toilet there, drinking water, there has to be a hut, there has to be even a shower room, you know what I'm saying, and there has to be food as well. So that means he had to become very creative to the extent that when you go to the bush, and I think this was being done by most people though, when you go to the bush, you have to uh, you know, create some form of shelter. You imagine if the weather changes and becomes unfavorable for you, either it's too sunny or there is rain, then you have to find a way how you're going to shelter yourself. And that means, he had to become so creative that, cut some sticks and create some form of a hut, or a shelter, as I may say, like sticks, like 4 sticks, assemble some sticks, then on top create some shelter, and of course using grass and stuff like that. So when it's too sunny or when it starts raining, you run into the hut, sit there, and you're able to shelter yourself there as you take care of the animals. So that was his kind of life. And of course, Now, what happens about food? Somebody will say, was he carrying like a lunchbox into the bush? Remember those days there was no lunchbox. Even plates, from the information I was being told, I think people used to use calabashes or broken clay pots. Those were now plates. So he'll go into the bush and he has to be very creative. Sometimes I always think technology started with my dad. Technology, because he was very creative. And now, when he gets into the bush, he has to look for fruits. Now, those days we had a lot of wild fruits. That's one thing I appreciate about all days, because the environment was as natural as possible. So wild fruits were there. In fact, when I was a young kid, I remember us even being able actually to find a good number of wild fruits, and not just one type in abundance, but a variety of wild fruits. So you could go in the bush, get these wild fruits, and once you get those wild fruits, we had guavas, we had even wild bananas, we had a lot of wild fruits. Get those fruits and that would serve him for lunch. It was not a specific time because all these fruits were all over, so it was for you to find a favorable time where you could look for them or climb trees and get them down and stuff like that. So what about drinking waters? As I said, the environment was as natural as possible from the information he used to give us, and therefore it meant it was not as difficult as these days to find clean drinking water. So we had a lot of streams and rivers which were not contaminated, and it was very easy for you to get drinking water. So he had, all this in the bush there, and of course, in the field, again, they could meet a number of boys, and you are strengthened. So you don't go there. You don't imagine this was a boy who used to sit and become too sad. What am I going to do? There are kids in the bush, but there in the bush, most of those days, as he used to tell us, one of the things that used to make you a hero was fights. So we used to have these bush fights, these kid fights. So people just pick on you and they bully you, and you have to fight somebody for you to to relieve yourself from that kind of intimidation. So, you're beaten today, tomorrow you are beaten, the next day you are beaten. But with time now you become stronger, or at least out of a number of people, you'll find one that you will be able to remove a tooth or something. Find one that you're able to beat, and that way, your confidence grows and respect, and you become a stronger and well respected kid by the time you get to a certain age, that teenage age, you have enough respect. So the field also could literally harden you. And while this is happening, all this is happening, don't forget that his role was to take care of the cattle. So you have to be totally in control. Sometimes you go to other field where there are other number of cattle and some are fighting, breaking horns and stuff like that. And when you go home and there is one bull or so that has broken a horn, that day even your horns will also be broken. So life was tough, so you had to really kind of fight your way into existence in one way or another. And remember, we are talking about a 7 to 10 years old kid, boy. We are not now talking about an adult, like what happened these days. We're talking about a small boy. For those who look at 7 to 10 years old boys, can they do anything today these days, unless they come from those hardship areas where there's a lot of pastoralism, and this is the life they have been used to and all that. But these days, elsewhere you won't find a 7 to 10 years old doing this kind of jobs. Actually, the parents can be sued, because you'll be told this is child kind of abuse also, or actual child abuse. So these are some of the things that used to happen that era. And then taking a shower was another aspect of his life. So how do you take a shower? So of course those streams and rivers, it meant you have to find also time where you can sneak while the kettle is contained in somewhere, and go and take a shower. Then come back home when he started. It was really self-contained, absolutely self-contained. There was too much creativity from Dad's end. And after that, then it meant this gentleman had to come home. And if you come home, you needed to be, you needed to actually convince the eyes of dad, now his dad, and the eyes of his old elder brothers, that he had done a good job. And with cattle, you cannot hide, because how much the cattle has eaten, and if it is he has eaten enough, it has the cattle has eaten enough, it is actually visibly obvious. So, for example, you look at the size of the abdomen. So that meant that he had to graze the animal in the bush, take this animal to the bush, I mean to the rivers and streams, let that animal take water and come back home. He said one day he got this funny trick, and it worked really for him. One day he was just so tired, and what he did, he stole some salt and then went to put in water. And of course, when you put salt in water, cattle take a lot of water. So the animals took a lot of water as a result. And then when he came home, everybody was happy and all that. And somehow, something went totally wrong. All these animals, most of them, they started having, diarrhea and things like that. And the next day, there were so many sick animals. And he had to be beaten and to explain. And those days, one of the things that was, being honest was one of a character that was, it was not, kids were less mischievous than today, because somehow the society really valued, looked at a kid's growth, really valued some form of morals for kids' growth. So, for example, you can actually remember, if you are in 40s, 30s, even late 20s, that even in those who have grown actually in those villages, that at a younger age, including even me when I was a young boy, you could not even sit when an adult was standing, including inside a vehicle. In fact, we never used to sit inside vehicles. But all that culture has changed. It's changed for the better, yes, but there are some aspects of morals that I think have totally been decayed. So this gentleman would now come back home. Okay, I was telling you about the story that it went wrong and he was really beaten, when the animal started diarrheaing the next day, and he had to explain what happened, and it was not a good story. So anyway, he could come home, and then one of the other funny story he used to tell us is the way he used to sleep. So one of the things that Dad used to tell us is, he was now this one, it was unfavorable, really unfavorable treatment, because the way he was, his sleeping issues were being handled was different from all the other siblings. So for him, he had been given some room, some house, some hut where he used to sleep. And he had his mattress and his blanket and his bed and his beddings as one thing. Guess what that was? His beddings, his mattress, his blanket, if you want to call it, his bed was one thing, and that was a sack. Do you know these thick brownish sacks that, I see them even this day? They're made of what? I think it's sisal, some thick brownish material, okay, that is sewn together to make a sack, like this 1 meter long thing. And I see it being used so much for storage of cereals, especially maize, especially for transportation. I see that a lot. So that was the kind of sack that he was being given. And that one sack was an integrated system. It was everything. So it was a mattress, it was a bedding and all. And now you start wondering, how was he sleeping on it? Or how was he rolling, sleep half of it and roll the other one over himself? Or how? No, that's not how he used to sleep. So he would actually, what dad used to describe as his daily sleep was this. He would go into the sack, leg first, okay? And used to say in Luya, it sounds so funny, but he used to say he used to fall on the ground, okay, until the next morning. And he would sleep. Honestly, you sleep. There's no better life. That is the life. So if you don't accept it, you will not be awake for every other, for every day. You that is the life. Sometimes the good thing about our mind, once we accept something, it becomes very easy, to go by, even if it is not comfortable for you, but you accept it and you just take it the way you are. So that's how he used to sleep. So he'll go leg first into the sack, probably up to the level of the neck, fall on the ground as he used to actually say, and then remember, this is not soft ground. This is rough ground, very uneven, and probably to kind of made of clay or so. So it is really rough. And then you are in another rough thing, the so-called sack. It is too rough, and you are not covering, even your whole body is up to the level of the neck, and then you are directly on the ground. The life was tough. So he would sleep that every day. And as if that was not enough, there is something very funny about him that used to happen. Guess what? He would sleep so sweet that when he wakes up in the morning, he realizes he has peed on himself. Yes, he used to pee on himself, and not like occasionally. This was like a hobby, like every day. It was like part of his life. So he used to pee on himself. We know that even these days, most of our kids pee on themselves up to a certain age, most of them. And it is normal. It's actually a physiological and anatomical thing. It is normal, okay, at a certain age, early in life, and sometimes, God forbid that, later in life, when people get to the age of 60s, 70s, 80s, and above. So he used to pee on himself. It's just that these days we've changed the way we manage it. Then he'll pee on himself. Now remember, this is a sack. So obviously, when you wake up in the morning and you've peed, and there's in that time for your clothing, because of course the sack to absorb all that kind of pee. Of course, when you come up in the morning, you cannot lie to anybody that you did not pee, because the whole the surface, the ground, it is wet. So then he wakes up in the morning, and this, you have to take these beddings in brackets, and remember that you need to use them in the evening. So you have to go and put them on the sun, and you're leaving very early in the morning at 6. And then if you are lucky, if you have someone there, you have to tell someone to remove it for you, just in case it rains or so. So he would go in the bush, leave his sack there, and go and hide. And that is, now life was like that. When he comes in the evening, sometimes he used to be very unlucky. He comes back, it is rained. He was not allowed to come back early, whether it is raining, whatever is happening outside there. You have to finish your role before you come back. So when he comes back, sometimes he could find this has been rained on, and he has no option other than now to find an alternative way to sleep. So uh, basically, sleep now on the ground, or find, those, he used to tell us, you could find this dry, there are some strands that come from the stem of a banana tree. Get a banana tree, the stem, when that stem dries, there are some flaps that fall off, but those flaps, they dry. So when they dry, they can be cut, and you can use them actually. Now he had that substitute. so that when the sack does not work out for any reason, now he has a substitute. He can sleep on that, or dry branches of those banana trees. So you cut branches and you dry them and you put them somewhere. So when it is nasty enough, you go and sleep there. So that was his kind of life, and it was daily life. And my friend, nobody cares, and the others don't stay like that. They live a better life. But that was his life. Nobody cares. Nobody, within the family sees that like a mistreatment. In fact, they feel like you are underserving them. So he was really disadvantaged. And he tells us when it came to food, he used to tell us when it came to food, food was something that used to be very stressful for him. You're hungry, okay? Come back in home, there is food being served, but food was being served in one big plate. You know those clay pots, broken clay pots, uteo thing. You know that uteo thing, the one that we used to kind of, if you want to remove some pebbles, some chaff from cereals like groundnut or like wheat, rice, or so. People used to put on uteo and then you blow it up. You kind of throw it down and up, throw it up, and then of course because of the wind and that those pebbles, those whatever chaff is light, to be blown away by wind. So that's the kind of life used to. That's the kind of plate that we used to be used to serve most of the solid meals. So that will be placed there, usually like dairy, viazi, banana, cassavas. And my friend, that is now where the story becomes interesting. Because as he said, you needed to be very smart. And being smart was not now brain alone, it was speed also. So if you have a speed governor in your mouth and in your hand, you'll really suffer. So one of the things that he had to, again, become technological is to now maximize on speed, and speed is too obvious to people. So you have to become even more trickier. That even though you are slower than other people, but every time you grab something, you're not grabbing one. And if it is like ugali, every time you go and grab whatever, when you literally, it's not even grabbing with your hand, it's like excavating with your hand. So what you leave there is a big hole. So you take 2, 3 times, the plate is plain. And then when you put in your mouth, your concentration is not even how sweet that food is. You are thinking of going back, and picking more and more. So, there was no sweetness with food. Food was there, but now, unless he has stolen some food or he eat those wild fruits, those are some of the food he'll have some leisure maybe to hide and eat. But, that just the formal eating in the house, it was very messy. Remember, the other siblings are bigger, so they'll bully you, they'll bully their way, and of course, you'll feel intimidated, even if they don't do anything against you, because of course the history. So it was really tough for him, and that was a daily experience again. So this gentleman says he used to be very hungry sometimes. He's so hungry, and he's denied food. That's something I did not tell you. He used also to be denied food. Deliberately, he's denied food. And what happens now when he's denied food, it means he has to find another way to find food. You cannot depend on wild fruits. Okay? So there was a rich neighbor. There was a certain rich neighbor. So dad used to go there. Remember, we are talking about a boy who is between 7 to 10 years. So dad used to go into the home of that neighbor. But he could not go straight because that neighbor was a harsh person. Okay? And there were two people. We are two people we're talking about, a husband and a wife. So he could go, get at the door, and just sneak in the home, get at the door. Nobody's seeing you until when you appear at the door. Then at the door, he starts popping his head like this. Then he comes back, pop his head, and come back inside. You want them to see you, but again, it is like nonverbal communication. You want them to see you are communicating something, but again, you are intimidated. You are afraid. Okay, so that kind of character, okay? Then when that man would see him, because it was not like once in a while, he was really a common a nuisance in that home. So once he see him, he's like, toka, kwenda, nafanya toka hapo, kwenda. This guy was a former military guy, and he used to chase him like the devil, my friend. He used to chase him like a dog, like a wild dog. And he would not go away. He would actually create whatever drama and attract mercy to a level that this guy had to literally stand, pick a cane, and chase him like the devil, like a dog. And he would run away. But thank God, God brought somebody on this earth called a woman. The wife had some heart. Men, sometimes our heart is so rocky, it is just so solid, it is so, stony. It cannot be melted by whatever kind of emotions or whatever kind of, body language. But the wife did not like that. So what the wife could do, become clever, pretend like he was also in support, she was also in support, but she's not in support. So she would provide some form of hidden communication, like pretend to be chasing this boy. Oh, wacha nimfukuze, let me be well, you tell the husband, okay, let me send this boy away. Then pick this boy and behave like, she's pushing the boy away. I'm talking about my dad, pushing, or rather sending the boy away from the home, and then tell that boy, come and hide in the bush, I will give you food. So that's what used to happen. So dad could actually come and hide inside. We used to have this grass that was being used to shelter houses, or rather thatch houses. And those days there was no iron sheet, there was no mabati. So that grass used to be grown. Almost every other person had a piece of land, or rather a portion of the land where that grass was grew. So that tough, rough ground grass that could grow maybe 1.5 meters high. So that's where dad could go and hide. Okay? You hide there. That grass used to have, these animals that, this wild animal. You have snakes, you have, squirrels, you have hares, you have, all forms of animal, you have wild birds, you have all that. So he was also in that category of those animals. Like, you know, because there's no difference. This is kind of a kid who looks desperate. Probably the animals, they're even better because they can get food so easily. But for him, he had to rely on some form of begging. So he'll go hide there in a specific place. And what this lady could do is to get the food into that place and at that location before even dad could come there, so that there is no risk of being found, both of you. So dad, when he comes there, he find maybe a plate of boiled maize, or boiled potato, boiled cassava. That is his meal. So he'll eat that, and that forms his meal. And then when that system was very well established, I think, as he said, life was fairly easier, because he just needed to communicate that he's hungry, and then there is a specific time when he comes to that area and he knows he'll find food. Women have some heart, my friend. Some, not all of them. So that's what happened. So his life was very tough. As he continued growing, dad even, ran away from home, went to, join those sugarcane cutters. There in the, those western sides, there was a lot of sugarcane those days, and with these sugarcane industries and all that. So he joined, he did that kind of work, but there was too much harassment. He was a young boy being molested, harassed, being beaten every other time. And the work was just too much, because it is manual work, and you are paid according to how much sugarcane you're able to cut and transport from one area to another area. Machines weren't, what we see these days. Machines weren't too much of what we see these days. And he got to a certain age where he got tired. Now this is, teenage, that late teenage age, where he got tired with his life. And he thought, I've been hearing people go to Nairobi, Nairobi. Which is this Nairobi? Because once in a while you see somebody coming from Nairobi and it's a big thing. Those days, Nairobi, capital city. Like, how do you really get there? So he'll see people going to Nairobi, Nairobi. Where is this Nairobi? And Dad knew his life could not get worse. It could only get better. It didn't matter where he could go, it would get better. So he woke up one day and went and took a bus, walked very far distance, and just disappeared from home, took a bus and went to Nairobi. He has no idea how Nairobi looks like, where he will stay. He's totally walking into wilderness with his eyes open. And that's what he did. When he went there, he told us he got to Machakos country bus. And the place was all over strange. Now he's seeing skyscrapers and well-dressed people and civilization, and he's just excited, but he's nowhere. He doesn't know what he'll eat, where he will go. There's nothing he knows. So somehow he ended up in a slum. So Dad lived in so many slums. From slum, he knew Mukurukwanji. He's lived in Mukurukwanjenga, Korogocho, Matare, Kibera. He knew all slums and, the details, the geographical structure of every slum. He could even tell you the history of a slum because he grew with some of those slums. Okay? And as he did that, obviously he had to survive and he had to find a job. So he started looking for these jobs, these manual jobs where you can try to get some work in a mjengo somewhere, go hang out, beg for a job, get a job for 2 days, you are chased away, get a job for 3 days, like that. And he continued surviving. And that meant his budget had to be very limited, okay, to a level that now you have to survive. So he told us, his lunch, he used to eat mandazi. And that lunch was breakfast and dinner most of the days. So there was mandazi somewhere called Bama Market. People used to make some mandazi there. So he had to use some technology again and realize, if I eat in the morning, I don't have money for lunch. And I cannot also stay up to the evening or ignore breakfast and lunch. So his option was now to do some mathematics, distribute the finances to solve kind of your problems, from an equilibrium point of view. So that means he had to kind of, he used to now, skip any food in the morning because he had to buy, and then he'll eat at lunch. And that lunch will also be dinner. So instead of eating one mandazi in the morning, eat one in the afternoon and one in the evening with uji porridge. He could actually, skip breakfast, and then you have lunch, and that lunch he would eat 3 mandazis and take porridge, okay? And that would be his breakfast, it would be dinner, and it would be his lunch. And that was not one day, that was his life, like that. Of course, some days he could be lucky, he meet somebody he's working with and they invite him for their lunch and stuff like that. This begging kind of life, very, very, very nasty. But for himself, that is what he could afford for a very long time. So he started working. But he was a hard-working boy, very respectful and honest. That one thing that our dad used to, advise us is, honesty really pays. If you want to build your integrity, be very honest. Even in your workplace, don't steal, don't, fight your own friends and stuff like that. Create good relationships, be honest, and be very hardworking. And that describes what he was, describes him. So from that, Dad grew, my friend. When he grew, he reached a point where he became even a supervisor of a small team. There was an Indian company where he started working and became a supervisor of a small team. Of course, they did not increase his salary, but he was just happy because he was being given now responsibility, and the frustration of doing too much manual work was dropping. And, there is nobody who does not like that form of recognition and growth, even if there is no financial upliftment, if I may call so. But he was very happy about that. So as he stayed there, he started learning one English word, two English word, because he said that company there was also a Muzungu person. There was someone from America, I think, or UK. The one of the senior managers, and that person got interested with that because they used to talk, like make jokes. That guy used to play with that like a pet in terms of talking to him, like, hey John, like throw one English word and see if he's able to respond, and teach him another language. So that thing that appeared to be like stupid, it became very important for him. Now, one thing I did not tell you is, when dad was a young kid, one day he saw kids going to school, and then he asked himself, what do these kids go to do to school? Can't I follow them? Then he went and contained the animals somewhere in the bush, and then sneaked into school and sat down in a class with these kids. And when I tell you a class, it is not a sheltered class, it is under a tree. That's where the class was. So he sat there 2 3 days before his discovery went wrong. The dad realized, and the dad beat him up so nasty that he could never attempt to go back to that class again. He couldn't go to that class again. That 2 3 attempts came to be very useful to him later. And this is where I had actually reached. My dad, when at this stage where I was telling you now, he started, trying to learn 1 2 English words. He asked himself, he got this interest, this new passion. I think I can go to school and study. You're talking about 20 years old kid, or 20 years old adult now. So can't I go to school? So he thought he could actually go to school. It was a very good idea. And he remembered the sweetness of those so many years back, over 10 years back, how those 3 days that he went to school were very special to him. Now that his passion grew from there. And he spoke to this Muzungu person and told this Muzungu person, I would love to go to school. Then Muzungu person told him, I've just heard there is some education for the old in Kenya. In this country, there's some education for the old people. Then that is how dad did his research and found out there was this Elimu ya Gumbaru which had just started those days. Elimu ya Gumbaru was education for the old. It was a certain program, I don't know if it is still there today, where people can go to class at whatever age. Okay? Whether you are 50 years, you are 70, you can go to class 1. You can go to nursery school. But those days, the system was class 1 up to 4. So those were 4 years, but 4 years of kind of crash program. You are taught a lot of stuff within 4 years, and it was not this. It was not more of exam oriented kind of studies like these days. It was a whole integrated system which also looks at skills, improving your attitude, your skills, and even your competence. So dad thought of it and said, oh, can't I save some money to go to school? Then when that Muzungu realized this boy was interested to go to school, he increased his salary slightly. So dad got a few extra coins, okay? And that motivated him to go to school. So he started studying. So he works, he studies, he works, he studies, he works, he studies for 4 years. Guess what happens? This is where the story starts turning to be sweet now. This gentleman, After 4 years, when he did his national examination, he became the best student, not just in the class, sorry, not just in the school, but in the whole country. We am talking about in the whole country for that program, Gumbaru program. And he got state recognition from the senior most person in the military after the president by the name of Charles Njonjo, the Kenyan military. Are we talking now? Does that really, turn the story to be so sweet? My friend, sometimes I tell people, if you have a vision, it will be fulfilled. And then all of a sudden, his life just turned. He became, from a church mouse to an icon, a national icon, with every employer chasing after him. And that is how his life turned suddenly. And from that kind of experience, he managed now to undergo a transition to a level that he got better jobs and he got very respectful jobs, and he was competing with people who had gone to university with degrees and stuff like that. And his struggle, rather his passion to become better and better in the society did not stop. Now, one thing that happened now with Dad, he invested in his sons and daughters' education. There was nothing more important for Dad than education for his sons and daughters. We have lived a simple life. I totally remember myself when I first saw, let me show you, just a minute. I totally remember myself when I first saw this. I think I was almost close to high school, okay? And before this, you know what was there? Newspapers. And before that, you know what we had used for long? Leaves. Used to stay in the village. Now I'm telling you, I was not born when Dad was very poor. All these things happened when I was not even born. But we lived a simple life, and I thank God. But when it came to education, there was no joke, my friend. In fact, you could not even watch TV beyond news. Either you watch a Vioja Mahakamani or you watch wrestling, that WWE thing. But soaps, remember we had Wild Rose and The Bold and the Beautiful. If you are found watching that, the punishment you'll be given, it will cover the whole year. Not being beaten. You will, your budget for school will be dropped. Okay? Your treatment will change, the way you'll be handled. You will be given more hours to study than any other person. You'll be subjected to too much studies. Whether you sleep, you open your eyes and you're not understanding, you must study. Physically, you must be seen studying. So we never took risk. I haven't even told you. I remember the first time I wore this. High school. Actually, it was primary school. Primary school at class 7, I was asthmatic. And the doctor said I need to protect myself from cold. So I was told to wear shoes and all that. I used to wear this. And I feel so odd because in our school we used to put our legs down like chicken. There were no even sandals or slippers, the way you call it. So we all of us studied in that primary school. We are talking about 17 siblings. Don't ask me so many questions about 17, like start wondering. 17 is not a lot. 17 siblings, we studied in one school. And I was among the lucky ones to put on a shoe at class 7. And since I looked so odd, or I felt so odd among other pupils, I used to go, I get somewhere and I hide the shoes. Then when I come back from school in the evening, Now I put on the shoes. Sometimes I find they have been rained on. One day, actually, I lost the shoes. I came back and they were not there. And then I was asked to explain where the shoes went from my head, my legs. How did they disappear from my legs? It was, I had to become also, creative like my dad. I don't know, but I'm sure I gave a false story. So now, before even my dad became a great person, he was married. He got married. And he used to tell us when he got married, things were not easy for him. He got married when he was still a peasant. And he used to tell us actually what happened. His bed now, he created a bed from some poles, wooden poles, and tied. There were no nails, so you get some, fibers, some form of fibers from trees, the barks of trees, and so, and tie your bed together. And the mattress, even